Hello everyone, myself Sangeeta Nikam. Let's start our today's lecture Science and Technology Part 2, Chapter number 10 Disaster Management. In this chapter, we will see disaster, types of disaster, effect or impact of disaster, disaster management, the nature and extent of disaster, first aid and emergency action, and mock drill. Can you recall what is disaster? Disaster is the incidents that occur suddenly, causing heavy damage to life and property. The disaster can be man-made or due to natural reason. Which disaster have you experienced in your area? On September 2019, there was heavy downpour in Pune. The disaster has been experienced recently. 26 November 2018, there was an attack of several places by Pakistani terrorists. The stories about the deaths and damage caused by this disaster were seen in the films and learned about this from our elders. What are the effects of that disaster on local and surrounding conditions? Due to heavy downpour in Pune, there was waterlogging in all the shallow areas. All the transport system collapsed on that day. Large trees fell down, injuring the people. The waterlogging caused conditions like floods. Schools, colleges, and offices were shut down. People were caught in troublesome situation. Disaster. Variously dangerous events occur many times in the environment. Those are called disasters. Some of the main natural disasters are floods, wet and dry famine, cyclones, earthquake, volcanoes, etc. These are all of the sudden trouble to be a mankind. Some such events cause sudden changes in the environment and thereby cause the damage to it. Environment is also damaged due to use of natural resources for our development. This leads to sudden disasters, unexpected to human. These can be called as man-made disaster. United Nations has defined the disaster as the sudden events that leads to the huge loss of life and property. Words like huge and sudden are important in the definition. As the disaster occurs suddenly, it cannot be predicted. Hence, precautions are not possible. Huge losses to the property occur in the area of disaster. There are long-term effects on society due to incidents of life and property loss. Various areas of life like economic, social, cultural, political, law and administration, etc. are affected by it. The life in the area of disaster disturbs totally. There is a loss to life and property of the people in distress. Earlier, we have studied various types of disasters and measures to be taken. None of the different disasters are similar. Period of each disaster is not same. Some disasters are short term, whereas some are long term. Reasons behind each disaster are also different. Depending upon the nature of disaster, it can be determined that which component of the environment will be affected more. Which are the two main types of disaster? According to preliminary classification of disaster, there are two main types of disaster, natural and man-made. Earlier, we have studied the effects of various types of disasters and the precautionary measures to be taken in case any disaster happen. We can classify the disaster in other way too, like catastrophic disaster, example cyclones in the Odisha, catastrophic earthquakes of Gujarat and Latur, frequently buzzing cyclones in coastal Andhra Pradesh, etc., which lead to total chaos, huge loss of life and property of respective region. However, irrespective of all these, life has always returned to normal within short time. Disasters making the impact for long duration are those whose after effects are either severe or severity increases with the time. Example, famine, various problems of crop, strikes of workers, rising levels of oceans and desertification, etc. How can disaster be classified depending upon various criteria? Depending upon the various criteria, the main criteria are the extent of damage caused, the period of disaster, the long-term effects, and the reason for disaster. Types of disaster: geophysical. Geophysical are of two types: geological and atmospheric. Geological example: earthquake, volcano, tsunami, landslides, landfall, erosion, alkalization, flooding, etc. Atmospheric: hot and cold waves, snowstorms, snowfall, cyclones, hailstorm, drought, flood, meteorite, sunspots, etc. Biological are of two types: plant and animal. Plant: forest fire, fungal disease spreading, blister, weed, aquatic, carrot grass, common grass. Animal: infectious viruses, bacteria, cholera, malaria, hepatitis, plague, insect bites of poisonous animals, etc. Man-made are of two types: unknown and international. Unknown: poisonous gases, atomic test, unplanned action, accident. International: war, fire, bomb blast, forced migration, terrorism, rapes, child labor. Can you recall which are the destructive effects of flood? The flood waters uproot the trees. The houses collapse due to surge of water. The fields get waterlogged. The water does not recede. The cattle die of asphyxiation, of drowning. Since everything is underwater, the process of decomposition begins at a higher rate, and this may spread the epidemics of the diseases. Which are the effect of dry famine? In dry famine, there is a scarcity of water. The crops die as there is no proper irrigation, and there is a severe food storage due to the dearth of water. The cattle die and human beings are forced to migrate. Which are the destructive effects of earthquake? Earthquake is responsible for large scale devastation. The houses collapse, the roads are damaged, making the transportation impossible. The electricity and water supply is disrupted due to damage, and there is large scale damage to lives and property. What is forest fire? What is its effect on environment. The largely spared fire of dry grass, shrubs and trees in the forest due to heightened temperature is called forest fire. The effect of forest fire on the environment is greatly devastating. Biodiversity is lost, plants and animals die due to fire, the vegetation becomes dead as the plants turn into ash, the atmosphere is full of smoke and hence causes air pollution. Effects of disaster. We have understood the serious effects of disaster with the help of above mentioned questions. Collapsing of bridges, flooding of coastal villages, shortage of food are some of the problems of floods. Collapsing of houses, developing cracks in land are some of the effects of earthquake. Disasters like forest fires and drought also adversely affect the environment. However, what is the exact nature of these disasters? Whether there are any changes in nature before the occurrences of disaster? For how long the effects occur after the occurrence of disaster? How? It needs to be think over all these aspects. This helps us to understand the nature and gravity of disaster. Disaster definitely affect the economy of nation. That effect is always relative to disaster and economy. That is, if any port is destroyed. There are long lasting effects on economy due to huge expenses on the reconstructions. An effect of disaster on social leadership is that if local leadership is not strong enough, citizens become confused. It affects their participation in rescue and rehabilitation activities. Administrative problems arise during the disaster. If local governing bodies are affected by disasters, related departments cannot be answer the problems of disaster efficiently. All the concerned departments are affected by disaster and thereby entire system collapses. Complete the chart. Uh, disaster are of economic type, that is a sudden increase in fund expenditure, shortages of funds and development of other sectors, decrease in the productivity. Social effect of disaster. People will become homeless as their houses will collapse. Since their belongings are lost, they will need food, water, clothing and shelter. Crimes and theft will be arise. Environmental. Partial or complete collapsing of buildings, drying out water sources, contamination of water, stinky pollution of environment due to decomposing corpses of humans and other animals. Administrative professional. Stress on workers, collapsing of transport system, shortage of facilities, etc. Political. The proper and strong leadership will provide health and care to the victims. Government compensation will be given immediately. Medical. Injuries, emotional, mental stress increase in epidemics, death of victims. Nature and scope of disaster. Taking in the consideration the scope of disaster, some of the important facts must be thought over as follows. 1. Pre-disaster phase. Second, warning phase. Third, emergency phase. Fourth, rehabilitation phase. Fifth, recovery phase. And sixth is reconstruction phase. Taking into consideration the nature and the scope of disaster, only three aspects of disaster are important for common citizens. Phase of emergency. Important characters of this phase is that maximum lives can be saved by quick actions during this phase only. Various actions like search and rescue operations, medical assistance, first aid, restoring communication services, removing the people from affected area are expected in this phase. Gravity of disaster can be estimated in this phase only. Transitional phase. Rehabilitation work is started in this phase. After the subsidence of one type of disaster, it includes clearing of debris, restoring water supply, repairing roads, etc. so that it will help to bring normally in public life. Rehabilitation of victim is important aspect of this phase. Generally, different institutes offer the monetary and other type of help to such people. It helps to soothe the mental stress at the earliest if these victims are offered with permanent means of earning livelihood, and this is true rehabilitation. 3. Reconstruction phase. This is highly complicated phase. This phase begins in transitional phase. People reconstruct their buildings and facilities like roads and water supply are restored. Farming practices are restarted. However, it takes long time for reconstruction. Planet Earth has experienced many natural disasters. Listening to the description of those disasters brings the numbers to the mind. Most of the disasters are related unprecedented situation having been occurred in the Asian continent and region of Pacific Ocean. Huge loss of life and planet Earth has been occurred due to such disaster. Generally, such conditions of natural imbalance have been arisen due to the greed of economic progress of human beings. In reality, old problems of several years have become fierce. Example, increasing population, its increasing needs, emerging problems out of it are now at the extreme end. Such a disaster have been increased after the World War II. Condition of instability arises in the country due to various reasons like economic inequality, racial and religious differences, etc. Incidents like terrorism, abduction, social differences have been a routine now. Production and use of harmful chemicals is under ban in developed countries. However, production of either same or those chemicals which can wipe out the human race is common in developing and poor countries. Another such threat to human being is from the atomic energy plants. Example, radiation leakage occurs after a blast in atomic energy plant at Chernobyl, Russia. Its ill effects are still experienced in region. This atomic energy plant was only used for electricity generation. Nowadays, many countries are equipped with atomic energy. Out of this, risk of radiation leakage is increasing due to carelessness. Hence, importance of disaster management has become the foremost need of almost all the nations. In fact, it is most necessary for citizens of all countries because they are main sufferers in any type of disaster. Hence, direct participation of citizens in disaster management is highly necessary. Similarly, disaster management schemes should be changed with the respect to location, time, and nature of disaster. It should not be restricted for particular period. Overall, there may be any type of disaster. It should be overcome. Concept of disaster management has been arisen out of this only. Disaster management. Disaster may be minor or major, short time or long time. It should be overcome and effective disaster management is necessary for it. There is a close relationship between disaster management and public participation. Disaster management is either prevention of disaster or making arrangements to face it or at least achieve the abilities to face it. Disaster is very fast process. In fact, it is accident. What shall we do in such situation? How can we protect ourselves, our belongings and animals? In case of disaster management, there should be an attempt to minimize the losses. Disasters are never planned, but losses due to it can be prevented in planned manner. Objectives of disaster management: disposal of human life suffered by human being during the calamity and release of people. Second, supply of essential commodities of people to reduce the effect of disaster. Third, the restore of the human life in the region by creating reconciliation in disaster. Fourth, rehabilitant disaster victims. Fifth, considering protective measure in disaster, such a disaster will not reach in future and slow take care to reduce their intensity. Disaster management is achieving or time to time improving the ability to face the disaster through scientific and careful observation and analysis of data. For example, preparing the action plan through study of various aspects like preventive measures, rehabilitations, and construction and executing that plan is nothing but the management of disaster. Disaster management can be divided into two parts: pre-disaster management and post-disaster management. Pre-disaster management, this includes the complete preparation and planning to face any type of disaster. For that purpose, 1. Identifying the pro-disaster areas, collecting the information about the intensity of disaster and probable sites of disaster through predictive intensity maps and hazard maps respectively. getting special training for disaster management, increasing awareness about disaster management among the general public through training programs, mass media, and etc. Post disaster management. Post disaster management 1. Providing all type of necessary help to victims of disaster. Participation of preferably local people saved from the disaster in arranging the help of victims. Quick establishment of help center. Different types of disasters need different types of control centers. Categorization of help material received from control center, delivering the material to victims, and continuous review of help. Being always prepared for disaster rescue. Observe the disaster cycle given below and explain each aspects of disaster of earthquake. Main aspects of disaster management cycle. Preparation. Plan is prepared to minimize the destruction in any disaster of if occurs. Redemption. Plan for minimizing the damage to the society and country. Preparedness. A plan is chalked out so as to get quick response from general public and administration. Impact of disaster. Intensity of various aspects of disaster and disaster management are reviewed. Response. Response to the disaster is to be given immediately after the incidents. This factor is followed by the disaster strike in this cycle. Resurgence. Resurgence is an important link between emergency measures and national progress. Resurrection. Resurrection is a stage used for the welfare and rehabilitation of the nation. Restoration. This is an important link between measures after the disaster and national development. This step is useful for progress, nation, and rehabilitation. Structure of Disaster Management Authority. In case of disaster, an authority has been established at the level of government. Following flowchart indicates the function of control and coordination under the disaster management from national to village level. Disaster Management Act 2005 has been passed in our country. National Disaster Management Authority Chairman, Prime Minister. State Disaster Management Authority Chairman, Chief Minister. District Disaster Management Authority Chairman, Collector. Taluka Disaster Management Authority Chairman, Tahsildar. Village Level Committee Chairman, Sarpanch. General Public. System involved in actual rescue and rehabilitation work. Other social private organization also. Organization providing precautionary warning. Always remember, though avoidance of natural disaster is impossible, loss out of it can be minimized. However, man-made disaster can be avoided. Helping each other in the crisis of disaster is our ethical responsibility. District Disaster Management Authority. District Disaster Management Authority. At the district level, district collector is responsible for disaster management and implementation of rehabilitation schemes. Collector is planning, coordinating, and controlling The implementation of rehabilitation program gives out necessary instruction and reviews the entire system. District collector is also responsible for designing the schemes for each district separately for each type of disaster and getting those sanctioned from state level authorities. District wise disaster control unit. District control unit is established immediately either after the impact of disaster or getting intimation about it. It reviews about the various aspects of disaster, keep continuous contact with various agencies like Army, Air Force, Navy, Telecommunication Department, paramilitary forces, etc. For getting help, it is also responsible for coordinating with various voluntary organizations for their help in disaster management. Can you tell what is first aid? First aid is a primary help given in the sick or injured person until full medical treatment is available. How can we offer first aid to victims of any disaster? The injured person should be helped and kept in resting position in which he or she is at ease. Depending upon the nature of the disaster, first aid given may be different, but the most important is timely rescue, which can help the victim to survive. First aid and emergency action. You can study earlier the classes about the types of first aid to be offered to the persons injured in disaster. Use of this knowledge is useful for offering the help of classmates or people around you facing any disaster and injured therein. Sometimes we have to face the disaster due to our own unawareness. Some symbols given besides are seen used around us. Those symbols can be ignored. Such symbols are useful to avoid the mishap. या 3 signs दिए हैं, explosive, flammable gases and others. Various disasters are there seeing in this picture. The picture shown above the showing earthquake. A is earthquake, B is fire and C is snake bite. In the above disaster, the initial precaution to be given as follows. Earthquake. In case of earthquake, one should immediately come out of house and stand in the open ground. If this is not possible, one has to go below the table or any other cover during the collapse of building. There should not be head injury. This precaution is basically for prevention of dangerous injuries and saving our life. Switch off the power supply if in journey. Stay inside the vehicle. Second is fire. Fire and foremost is the save ourselves from fire. Then one can help others in rescue operations, help others to extinguish fire, call the fire department for immediate action. Snake bite. Many times the biting snake can be non-venomous too, but the victim is psychological affected too. The toric should be tied in the region above the snake bite. The rope piece of cloth or even handkerchief can be used for this purpose, so that venom, if any, should not rise and reach vital organs. The wound should be made near the bite wound so that blood will ooze out and some venom can automatically flow out. Though these are first aid measures, the victim should be rushed to qualified doctor for an injection of antivenin. In the second picture, observe the various activities are there. A, B, C, D, E, F. Here is the action shown in the above pictures are as follows. A, the patient is made to be lie in the stretcher. He must be unconscious and injured to greater extent so that he cannot be moved by himself. Second, B is the patient is helped by giving artificial respiration. Probably the victim is suffocated and needs oxygen supply. C and D, the patient is being picked up. Most probably the patient is unconscious. E is the patient is carried on back, as in carrying piggy back position. He too is unconscious and needs to be shifted for medical treatment. F, the patient in this picture is carried by human crutch method. When victim's one leg is injured, he cannot be walked without support. Hence, he needs to be carried in such a way. In emergency condition, various transportation methods like cradle method, carrying on back, carrying on two hands are to be followed. Those methods depend upon the condition of victim. We face different types of major and minor disaster in our daily life. Varieties of disasters like accidents, stampede, injuries in fighting, electric shock, burns, heat shock, snake bite, dog bite, fire due to electric short circuit, epidemic of any disease, etc. happen around us. Victims of disasters need to be offered some primary help before actual medical treatment. First aid is useful in such circumstances. Complete the chart. Objectives of first aid: to give medical help to victim till the doctor arrives, to give treatment immediately, relieving the pains, to provide safety and security to the victims, attempts to improve the condition, transporting the victim safely and with care to hospitals, saving lives, preventing deterioration of condition of victims of disaster. First aid kit. It is essential to have material necessary for first aid with us. That material is available in first aid kit. You can also prepare the first aid kit. It is also important to use whatever the material available in the given condition for first aid. The necessary material in first aid box: 1. Bandage strips of different size, wound gauze, triangular and circular bandage, medicated cotton, hand gloves, clean and dry cloth pieces, soap, antiseptic Dettol or Savlon, safety pins, blade, small pins, needle, band-aid, torch, scissor, thermometer, petroleum jelly. Mock drill. It is a practice to check the preparedness of facing the disaster as early as possible. Virtual apparent situation of disaster is created to check the reaction time for any type of disaster. Trained personnel observe their responsibilities to check execution of plan designed for disaster redressal. This helps to check the efficacy of system prepared for disaster redressal. Mock drill is arranged on disaster of fire in various schools by the firefighters. It includes the demonstration like extinguishing the fire, rescuing the people trapped at the higher floors of building, rescuing the persons whose clothing have catched the fire, etc. Such activities are also arranged by police force and voluntary organization. Objectives of mock drill: evaluating the response to the disaster. Second, improving the coordination between various departments of disaster control. Third is identification of own abilities. Fourth is improving ability of quick response to disaster. Fifth is checking the competency of planned action, identifying the possible errors and risk. Always remember, do not chaos and push each other while using staircase in the school. Remind important helplines and use as per need. Example: police 100, firefighting force 101, disaster control unit 108, ambulance 102, etc. Follow the traffic rules. Look at the left and right side while crossing the road and ensure that any vehicle is not passing by. Do not touch any unclaimed object. Do not spread rumors. Do not make chaos at the crowded places. Today's students are future citizens of country. Cleanliness and health always coexist. Give up addiction and stay happy. Healthy life is the key to success. Follow the rules to avoid disaster. Thank you.